Fire up the hob. It's time for another episode of the Register's Kettle podcast. And we're even more international than usual this week as our systems editor, Tobias Mann, has been in Taiwan scoping out this year's Computex conference. If you're curious about what's coming from chip market leaders this year, you've come to the right place. Tobias, it's really good to see you from the other side of the globe.
Yeah, a whole 12 hours ahead, right? I don't
Yeah.
have it confused in my head, but yeah, it's good to be here, and
Yeah,
always
it's good and
happy
late
to
for
hop
you,
on.
so we'll try to keep this concise so we don't keep you from some sleep. So I think you filed a number of stories this week about Computex, like quite a few. So talk us through some of the biggest announcements or news items that have come out of this year's show.
Yeah, it's been a wild week here in Taiwan, and at least for the first half of it, it was sunny and
Hmm.
warm rather than the last half, which has been rainy and warm. But
Well, hopefully
in
that
in
means you've
terms
been
of
focusing more on the conference for the second half, right?
well, at least the air conditioning works in the conference center. That's certainly true.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, we had some interesting announcements, some of which we definitely had it anticipated.
Hmm.
I think the one that everybody had long hoped to see was NVIDIA's N1X. This is their kind of Apple Silicon competitor, high end, notebook SoC.
Right.
They're finally rolling that out on a Windows platform, and this is something that NVIDIA had been rumored to have been working on for years, but we only started to see inklings of what it could look like last year in some very
Hmm.
niche products, and now that silicon is going to be coming to notebooks. I think that's the big PC news from Computex. As sad as that might sound, of all the chip making stuff we got, that's probably the biggest. Intel
And
had
that's more like
some,
mainly, I'm assuming, consumer kind of,
yeah,
or are
that's
they talking
the,
about business notebooks and stuff too?
they're spinning it both ways.
Okay.
This is a 20 core CPU with like a 5070 class GPU strapped on to it,
Okay.
with up to 128 gigabytes of uh, unified memory. So this is
Okay.
a very, very high-end chip, and it's
Yeah.
expected to retail in notebooks that start around $3,000. And so
So we're talking about, yeah, high-end hardware here. Like you said, it's
high-end
kind of a
hardware.
Mac, an Apple Silicon competitor, so to speak.
Right. The funny thing is the chip's not new.
Oh.
So even NVIDIA is having to recycle parts to have something to talk about in the PC sphere. This is a part they announced back at CES in 2025. It was called the
Mhm.
GB10. At that time, Grace Blackwell miniaturized super chip.
Oh, so this
Um,
is a Blackwell derivative here.
yeah, it initially launched as part of what was originally called Project Digits, and
Mhm.
later actually launched to the market as the DGX Spark. This was like a mini AI development mini PC that we reviewed
Right,
back in
yeah, I remember
October.
when that came out. Yep, yep.
Um, and so really the silicon is being recycled, and what's new is the partnership NVIDIA embarked with Microsoft in order to kind of extend Windows support to this platform. And they're working on a bunch of agentic AI integrations into Windows, so
Well,
maybe
of course
Copilot
they
might be
are.
worth a damn. It's hard to
Yeah.
say.
So
But
now is this gonna be I mean, are these gonna be Microsoft branded machines then, or is this gonna be something that's available to the wider OEM market for PCs?
essentially every major OEM is going to have some version of this, whether
Okay,
under the RTX Spark branding. Microsoft will have hardware. They have a Surface product that they're also bringing out with it.
okay.
But I think that the partnership with Microsoft and Nvidia is largely focused on kind of doing something actually interesting and useful to end users with AI versus another chatbot, which
Right.
unfortunately is what most people kind of associate it with this technology at this point and kind of roll their eyes, or at least I do anyway.
Yeah, I don't did you hear so Microsoft had their I think was it Ignite this week? I can't remember what was this week
Uh,
also, but
Ignite is later in the year, I think. Build
yeah.
this year week.
Right. So at Build this week, they announced new autopilots, right? Right, like they're trying to do something useful with that AI, right? Turn it into something that's completely autonomous and always watching everything you do. But that's Not what we're here to talk about. I'm sure we could go on about Microsoft and agentic AI being stuffed in everyone's faces for a
Right.
while, but,
We also
but
got a
go ahead.
couple other we also got a couple other, announcements this week
Mhm.
from Intel that are worth mentioning, at least on the PC side. Handheld gaming, processors, which didn't, get a ton of attention, mostly because, you know, everything has gotten so much more expensive that it's just kind of
Right.
like, "Great, a new thing I can't afford."
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we'll get to some of the pricing issues a bit later on in the podcast, but that also ties back to right the big factor in every trade show right now, and it seems like Computex, based on what I'm reading from what you reported and elsewhere, it was an AI show again this year, right? I mean, that's kind of what it seemed like. Everything was being turned toward feeding the great large language model beast.
Every conference is an AI conference now.
Yep.
And that includes Computex. Even
Hmm.
NVIDIA's PC hardware launch was steeped in AI. You
Yeah,
just can't
absolutely.
escape it. And
Yeah,
it was every keynote
yeah.
was AI, AI, AI. Whether it was
Yep.
Jensen getting on stage at GTC Taipei because they've gotten too big for Computex, so they have to hold their own conference on the sidelines, as well. But,
Right.
you know, the just everything just came down to artificial intelligence and how it's going to revolutionize the world, also maybe turn the entire world into a surveillance state if Cristiano Amon has his way.
Yeah, what did he say? He was talking about, AI agents are going to be inescapable according to what he said in the story you covered. You were at that keynote, I assume?
Yes, yeah, that was probably the most dystopian of the keynotes that I caught. And I get the message he's trying to say. He's trying to make the argument that doing AI compute inference in the cloud is just not economically viable. It needs to
Right.
move down the stack, and that means it needs to move down onto our personal devices, whether that's notebooks and smartphones, and he seems to think we're going to have AI, inference happening in earbuds even.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, I saw that. Glasses, obviously, so that it can watch everything you do.
And so I think the creepiest moment in all of it was when he just said, basically on the topic of the economics of it all, said resistance is futile. It's like this is happening whether you want it or not. But in that same breath, he starts going on about 6G because, of course, this is a big connectivity chip maker.
Right.
Um, and how 6G is going to turn all of us into walking cameras, and 6G towers are going to function like radars that let us track everything from bicycles to cars to drones in the sky. And
Yeah, it's tech leaders always try to spin that as like this thing that's great for data and great for, oh, we're going to be able to maximize every little thing we do, right? With for the most efficient XYZ. But right, they always kind of seem to neglect the fact that I don't think the average person really wants to be tracked by their cell phone towers, even if they don't have a phone. It's a little intrusive, to put it lightly.
yeah, I
Um,
certainly don't want to be tracked. And
no,
you would think somebody, maybe even Copilot, could have checked over his keynote speech to see if this is it. What is the vibe here? Is it
yeah.
creepy? Yeah, it's kind of
Yeah,
creepy.
maybe you shouldn't maybe you should cut this out or rephrase it a little bit.
Resistance is futile. Maybe don't say that part
Yeah,
out loud.
drop the Borg reference, because I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, anyone in this space probably is a Star Trek fan, I know I am, and I mean, when you hear resistance is futile, you immediately think, right? Yeah, the Star Trek, the Borg, the thing that assimilates everything, and sucks it into the big collective,
Yeah.
AKA big large
Yeah, if you're
language
gonna make a
model.
pop culture reference appealing to nerds, don't make it a creepy one.
Yeah, yeah, seriously. And I guess Marvel was also talking about, kind of on the AI front too, ditching copper finally in favor of optical connections. I know they're not the first company to take this up, but Jensen seemed dead sure that this was going to turn them into a trillion-dollar company.
Yeah, this is one of the more interesting chats, mostly because of the dialogue between Jensen and Matt Murphy, the
Hmm.
CEO of Marvell. Marvell is a company that most people probably have never heard of before today or before this
Hmm.
week, when Jensen sent its stock prices through the roof. with the $1 trillion next $1 trillion company claim. Um,
Yeah.
but they are a chip development company and IP house that has collected a lot of intellectual property around networking and
Mhm.
photonics.
They're fabless, is
And
that correct?
sorry.
They're fabless, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
they design and then license out, kind of shake and bake, component pieces of a larger design. So you might go to
Right.
them to license, a piece of the chip that you don't want to spend resources on, and you just need it to work. So you're going to spend money on engineers to do the core part that you're interested in, then buy the rest from Marvell. Broadcom also operates in this space.
Right.
Um, and but we're in an interesting place where the speeds that these networks need to operate for the AI infrastructure to work efficiently keep doubling and doubling
Right.
really quickly. And the problem with going faster is every time you double the speed, you have the reach on copper.
Right. So I think you mentioned in your story a 400 gigabit interconnect that only moved, I think, 2.5 meters. Was that right in terms of length?
Right. Yeah. We're at the point where at 200 gig, it's about 2.5 meters.
Okay,
And it's
200
gonna
gig.
get
Sorry.
halved as you go to 400 gig.
Right.
These are lanes. So, you think about, ports on a network switch today, and you might see 400 gig or, 800 gig or 1.6 T.
Right.
But those are assembled from, 4 to 8 lanes at these speeds.
Hmm.
It's not the port speed, it's the link speed. At 400 gigabit, you're down to like 1.25 meters, which
Right.
like you're at the limit of a rack. You have to put
Yeah.
we are putting the switches in the middle of the rack for these systems for a reason because that's the where you can get the best reach to all the stuff you got to plug in.
Right.
Once we go to 800, you're going to be supremely limited, and
Yeah.
so you have to start thinking about optics at some level. Um, There's a lot of ways to do this, but Matt Murphy is convinced that within 10 years, copper is basically going to go away. And there's a lot of companies that have been working towards this. Today, the way we connect to optics is really complicated. You have a chip that communicates over copper through
Hmm.
PCB out to, a front end, so PCI interface or something like that. That has to go up to a network interface, and then you're going to plug a pluggable optic in. And then you can go out over the fiber, and then you have to have basically the same thing on the other end, or there might be a
Right.
switch in the middle
Right.
with more pluggable optics. Those pluggable optics are one of the reasons that we haven't done this yet. If we're heading in this direction, just not move to optics now. And the reason is pluggables are really power hungry, especially at the speeds we're talking about. You need lots of them.
Hmm.
Um, we're talking about, let's see, like 72, uh, pluggables for one GPU potentially, and each
Oh,
pluggable
wow.
pulls like 15 watts. So you
Yeah.
start
That's
doing
a
the math,
lot of
or not
power.
72, but 18. So sorry, or 36.
Either way, still, we're still talking about a lot of power.
Yeah, it's a lot of power. It adds up really, really quickly. The numbers get
Yeah.
really confusing very quickly, but the point is you just need an absurd amount of pluggables. And to use really simple numbers, NVIDIA faced this problem 2 years ago. They said, why not just do optics? We're going to have to go there eventually. And they did the math, and it was going to add 20 kilowatts of power to a rack that was already pulling 120. And
Wow.
so, and as you go faster, you need faster pluggables. Eventually, we'll get to the point where the fibers go straight to the chip. There, you've cut out all of those copper interconnects all the way out, and the
Hmm.
fiber go to the chip, and you might have a little connector that goes from fiber to fiber
Hmm.
in between. And at
So
that
that's
point,
coming.
that's coming. Matt
Yeah.
Murphy thinks it's probably 10 years out that we're going to get to a point where most of the copper is gone.
Hmm.
Um, and you'll still use it for power, but you're not going to be using it for data communications.
Well, it'd be great
But
if that would kind of resolve our issue with the copper shortage. That'd be
it would help with copper shortage, but it would also help with memory.
okay.
So today, the reason everything has to go in one box, you have a CPU, a GPU, you have a bunch of memory. All of it has to go in one box, and it has to be in a rate in a it's a relatively fixed ratio
Right.
of these things. One CPU to two GPUs to X amount of memory, and regardless of whether your application, your workload actually needs that ratio or not, that's what you're stuck with.
Mhm.
Um, when everything is optically interconnected, Murphy is contending that you could just have a box full of GPUs in one corner of your data center. You get a memory
It'd be
over in the other corner and
basically,
CPUs
it'd
in
be
another
fast enough to
corner.
have a distributed system, essentially.
Right, and
Okay.
you can and then you can then reallocate it. And there are protocols, Compute Express Link. This is a technology that's been under development for a long time. It allows for memory sharing on compatible components. And memory sharing is interesting because you can have, two different systems doing almost exactly the same thing, and it's basically deduplicating it. So they're only
Huh.
using the memory of like one and a quarter versus two machines. And so we can dramatically potentially reduce the memory consumption of these systems by sharing the memory like it's a network attached storage device almost.
Yeah. So if Marvel's kind of or Marvell, sorry, is putting this, forward as their strategy and causing Jensen to basically cause their stock to just skyrocket, right? That to me sounds like it's just they're getting their share of the bubble, right? I mean, a lot of what I wonder is, are all what's going on there this week? Do you think it's more bubble inflation, or do you think these are, you know, practical, realistic things they're saying in an attempt to move an industry forward regardless of the potential collapse.
Well, I think there's a lot of industry building going on, certainly.
Mhm.
But I think to your point, hype is something that, if you can't launch a product, then you can hype up your product or hype up somebody else's.
Yeah.
NVIDIA invested $2 billion in Marvell not that long ago. So I'm sure Jensen is eager to get his money's worth out of that investment.
Oh,
And,
sure. Yeah.
you know, jacking up the stock price with, predictions is probably a pretty decent way of, you know, getting things going. But
Yeah.
the reality is that, for any of the things that, Matt Murphy is talking about, that for Jensen's prediction to come true, um, there's a lot of the industry that needs to start ramping up now in
Yeah.
preparation of this. And if you want to keep the bubble from popping, a good way to do that is to make sure that you don't run into roadblocks too early in the. So if you've got capital to burn in getting, um, in kind of building the track further out in front of the train, I'm mixing a lot of metaphors here because it's late, but um, this seems to be what NVIDIA is doing here, and it feels like we're seeing a lot more of that. This is not the first time NVIDIA has thrown money at optics in the last couple months. They've invested
Mhm.
heavily in photonics companies, and Marvell is just the latest
That's
example.
the latest. Yeah. So I guess, moving on from that, you know, I feel like this is kind of a good opportunity. We've seen memory prices just skyrocket recently, right? Memory and storage prices are going through the roof. No, there's no reason to guess on that. It's been AI, and people have been fingering AI chip needs as the cause for a while now. What was the sense like there, right? Do customers, do speakers, did the air seem to be kind of thick with concern over an affordability, or what? Like, what's the finger on the pulse there? Are people concerned about pricing?
Yeah, I think people are concerned about pricing, but less so on the components that we used to get excited about and more so on
Mhm.
things that touch memory. Memory has
Right.
basically eaten everybody's lunch.
Yeah.
Um, it doesn't matter whether you're building AI servers or you're just trying to buy a new laptop. The share of the price on either of those things associated with memory has just become, you know, the dominant force in what's driving up memory.
Hmm.
Um, I was talking to AMD this week about some products that they have in the works, trying to build up their developer kind of on ramp for around their products. Something they have kind of a deficit, and they're trying to catch up with NVIDIA on. And I'd asked them, the device that they're going to do this with is $4,000.
Yeah.
Um, and so, and they said 75% of that is now memory and storage.
Wow.
And what's crazy is the hardware in it's not new. And so a
Hmm.
year ago, that $4,000 box could be had for under 2,000.
Yeah, it's the same with the Steam Deck, right? Like it skyrocketed in price as a consumer device example, right? We talked about this in last week's episode. It was just like it's gone through the roof, and it's not new hardware. It's the same thing. It's just that in order to make it, Valve's markups are now going to have to be so much higher, or because of the price of of the memory and the storage in the thing. It's ludicrous.
Right, and so I was walking around some of the memory vendor or consumer memory vendors. They don't make the memory, but they package it, and
Right.
they're how consumers buy it. And they were all advertising, their new SSDs with capacities up to 8 terabytes, and new memory that with up to 128 gigabytes per DIMM. And I'm looking at this
Yeah.
going, And so we have a $8,000 SSD that I can't afford, and a
Yeah.
uh, memory kit that God knows how expensive that's going to be, but it's going to be
Right.
probably $2,000-3,000 for that. Um, like the addressable market for these products is shrinking because,
Yep.
you know, the consumer market simply can't bear it. And there's
Right.
a lot of
Right.
excitement that's lost on that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, when you say, "Oh, hey, here's the newest graphics card or the newest blah 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 blah," it's faster, it's greater, it's going to make your PC run, more efficiently, but it costs, more than 3 times more than the computer you bought. It's like, why should I get excited about that? It really makes me
Well,
wonder. I've been. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, we used to get excited when there was a 30% improvement in whatever performance market generation on
You
generation,
sure?
but that
Yeah.
was predicated on the price staying relatively, increasing by less than the performance increased.
Yep.
Why upgrade? Sure, the performance is 30% better, but the price doubled.
Yeah.
That's
So this
not a
this old
compelling
machine's
sale
gonna have to
pitch.
work for a little longer. Yeah.
Yeah.
It really makes me wonder. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Apple's the new MacBook Neo or whatever it's called, the cheap one, right? It's like I think I just read somewhere that they've had to double production because it's been so popular, right? Cheap hardware is like people want it, right? And it makes me wonder if, given the cost of high performance components, getting to the point where they're gonna be untenable for anyone but, hyperscalers and colo facilities that are running, all this stuff. I mean, are we looking at kind of a new normal in computing? Are these prices gonna come back down? Or are we getting to a point where this is gonna be the sort of thing where companies are gonna use this as an excuse to say, "Here's a cheap machine that you need all our services for." Are we moving in that direction?
It's an interesting question. There's a lot of shifting market dynamics around this kind of thing. And I think necessity, new markets are oftentimes born out of necessity.
Mhm.
Um, I would say that the MacBook Neo is an interesting example of this. It's like this is not a market that Apple has traditionally played in,
Right.
but they had excess capacity of the, I think it's the A19 that it's
Mhm.
based on, um, and they were able to leverage that into bringing a lower cost but still premium device to market. And in that there's some relief, and there's an ecosystem play. They can capture a market that has previously been inaccessible to them in kind of that low end Mac um, marketing. So
Mhm.
I do think that there's some opportunity for Microsoft to capitalize on this if they're smart. But I would also say that Windows has become increasingly hostile to users, and I think that they might be better served by focusing on fixing the software first.
Hmm.
Um, back in April, Intel did bring some new chips to market that are look like they're going to provide similar performance to a MacBook Neo at low
Hmm.
enough prices that we should start to see notebook vendors being able to compete on kind of the premium device with just enough performance to be interesting element of that. Um,
So you don't necessarily think we're looking at a period where we're going to all be sold Chromebooks and told or something to that effect, right? Like cheap machines that are basically going to be like, necessitating connected services that we can eventually either be handing over data or money for.
Right. Anytime you hit a kind of you stall out on the technological, the hardware side of things,
Uh huh.
software typically is where you see the most optimization and improvement. Um, but I do think that, if this idea of local AI is going to take over as kind of an economic driver, as Iman was kind of pushing, we're going to need memory. Like,
Yeah.
these models are not small, and
Yeah.
it needs to be fast memory. And so, right now those devices cost three or $4,000 to have even to get into the entry level of that.
Hmm.
And so it's kind of two forces working against each other. And the reality is the problem that all of this comes back to is that we can't control the memory markets.
Yep.
Uh, and at least from talking to folks at Tech Insights not that long ago, it looks like we're in this for the next year and a half or at least. And even
Yeah.
then, prices are going to settle rather than continuing to rise. It's not going to be the course correction that we've historically seen. Memory
Yeah.
markets are historically very cyclical. You have booms and busts. Prices go high. A Memory vendors raise enough money to ramp production again. They stop production. And when inventory gets high, prices drop because people are willing to pay less for it. But we're just not seeing that. The demand is so high that every memory module just gets eaten.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting couple of years here in the tech space as we kind of hopefully find some new balance. We'll see what comes of it, and chances are we will be right here at the kettle to talk about it after writing plenty of stories about it. So thanks again, Tobias, for joining me this week, and hopefully a safe flight home. And to everyone listening, we'll see you soon.